Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for tuning in. If you let us know from where are you tuning in, please let us know. We have a chat on the right. My name is Josue Ibanez, and as you know, we have these sessions every month, and I'm super excited about today's sessions. But before that, let me tell you about these sessions. As you know, we're here to inspire students, creators worldwide to connect them with their inner minds and processes by sharing top artists, creators in the immersive experience industry. And every month we talk to a creator in our industry live on our YouTube and Twitch channels. Thank you so much for your help and contribution, you guys, by just being here and by hearing these talks made the channel possible. So let me introduce you to our next creator. So Margaret Kerrison. Margaret's career spans of 16 years of creating narratives and writing for television, film, digital media, games, brand storytelling, location-based entertainment, narrative placemaking, and of course, immersive experiences. She was a Disney Imagineer and author of Immersive Storytelling for Real and Imagined Worlds, a writer's guide. And there's a new book coming that we're going to talk about it in a moment. She is a story lead consultant and writer for multiple award-winning projects around the world, including Star Wars, Galaxy Age, Batuu Bounty Hunters, Rise of the Resistance, among many others. Thank you so much for Margaret for being here. Welcome. It's so okay. Well, let me just bring.
Hi, everyone. Thank you for tuning in. Thanks for inviting me, Josue. Long time no see since off Mexico in Mexico City.
I know. So I have to say, like Margaret's talk at Off in Mexico City was one of the most mind-blowing talks, and I don't know who been in the HQ workshops and teaching. I do myself some storytelling workshops, and I really enjoy this subject. Talking about the storytelling, I think is one of the most valuable things to discuss within the industry. And first of all, I want to thank you, Margaret, because I think your book that we're gonna share with you here now, it's one of those kind of like first book that kind of give us designer of immersive experiences a first look into how to design experiences. And thank you for writing that. This is how I know Margaret, because I found this book that someone recommended to me. I read it and it was like, wow, this crazy mind blown happening in my mind. It's like, I want to know her, like, so I do really want to speak with her and to talk about the storytelling. And lucky for me, I invited her to the Off Festival in Mexico. And she was here in Mexico, a couple of weeks ago or 3 weeks ago. Thank you so much for writing that book.
Oh yeah, I'm always so shocked when people say thank you to me. Thank you for reading my book, and thank you for sharing. All the readers and all the people out there who've reached out to me and said that from all disciplines and from all industries, because this was something that I wrote from a writer's point of view or other writers. And yet most of the people who reach out to me are not necessarily writers. They're all creators of some sort. Creators in everything from architecture to science fields to different types of communications fields, everything. Like I'm just so thankful and grateful that this really resonated with a lot of people, no matter what they do, because I think innately all of us are creative and we want to tap into our creativity. And so to get this response from people that they're so excited and energetic about this topic and how they can apply storytelling, whatever they do, is so important for everyone. So I'm just really glad that like you really responded very positively to it. So I'm hoping that it'll touch many more lives as well.
Yeah, thank you. So first thing first, the most valuable question about how the hell did you start this career as a writer for immersive experiences, right?
Yeah, I mean, it's a really good question. And I think that I really have to go back to what I was interested in as a child. And I think this is, whenever I'm lost in life, whether it's personal or professional, I always just remember back to when I was a kid and what I really enjoyed doing without anyone telling me what to do or any type of societal expectations of what you should be doing, right? So for me, I was always a very curious, creative, and very energetic kid. I always wanted to try everything, right? There was no that was like off limits to me. If I've never done it before, I was always very curious to try it. So growing up in the 1980s, when I had all of these tools for me to play with and explore. So everything from like the moment I learned how to write. I started writing my own poetry and comic books and short stories and all of these things. And when I also love to draw as well. So I would do a lot of arts and crafts. I would like make my own finger puppets. I would put on plays for my family and for my friends. I would cast them in my own, big video camera skits at home. And I would just find new ways of telling stories. And that's really it, when I think about all of the things I did as a kid and all of the things I continue to enjoy doing in my life throughout my, my school years and then my professional life, it was always this constant need to want to tell stories in different ways. And so for me, I never felt satisfied just telling a story in a traditional format or that has been told before. I was always curious to see what kind of tools and techniques I can use in order to make people believe in the story, to believe that they're in that world, meeting these people and having that experience. Did everything from creating my own mansion version in my cousin's bedroom. And then I would have my cousin and my sister and brother like to mansion, because the first time I saw the haunted mansion in Tokyo Disneyland, it blew me away. People do this? You can actually do this. You can use all of your senses to tell a story and take me into that story and make me believe that I'm in it. So that to me as a child, when I first experienced that, it was mind blowing to me. And I was always trying to find all of the different and unique ways to tell stories and really expectations for people to really make them think and reimagine how they can think about telling maybe different stories in different ways or the same stories in different ways, right? So that was something that, I've always been interested in. And that led me finally to going to film school at USC to do my MFA in screenwriting. And from there, I was mostly of traditional media because there wasn't a program yet for entertainment or immersive experience or any of that yet. And I remember sitting in my thesis class and my professor had said they need writers and storytellers for all kinds of things, not just for TV and film. They need writers and storytellers for, she was listing all of these various things. But one of the things that stuck in my head was they need writers for roller coasters, for theme parks. And I'm like, really? And I remember that night I came home, I Googled, writers for theme parks or something like that. And I found this whole industry of themed entertainment and immersive storytelling and immersive experiences, and really dove deep in it, because once I had my heart set on being able to tell that kind of story, I wanted to make sure that, I did all the things that I needed to do to get to where I wanted to go. And that ultimately, at the time, for me, was Walt Disney Imagineering. I was like, Haunted Mansion was what changed me. And I wanted to learn from the best of the best. I wanted to learn about, all magic and the techniques and the tools and the insights that they use to tell their stories. And during that time, while I was at Walt Disney Imagineering, I wrote the book during the pandemic because it was a big challenge for me. It's like, I had this book when I was studying at USC. I wish someone had told me that this type of industry existed, and that as a writer and a storyteller, I could make a living out of it, right? And so it was a challenge for me. I remember like my son was starting his first week of school, remote learning, and I started outlining, you know, if I were to teach anyone how to do this, there isn't quite a step-by-step guide, but can I provide enough of a foundation and a framework for people to ask the big important questions before they start designing? Because a lot of designers immediately jump into designing the thing, right? But really what you have to stop and ask yourself, how do I ask, or what are the most important questions to ask in order for us, for me as a creator and for us as a team of creators, how do we align ourselves into the same creative intent to build the same world, the same thing? So that's really a little, in a nutshell, story.
And I have to also share this with the audience. Like recently I was just writing a paper about trying to remember when I was the power to write a story or to design an experience. And I was like, like Disney has been doing this for many years, already, many years. And us, this community that are watching this channel, I think something happened in the industry, computers, graphic cards and everything, sensors and everything become more available for people to do things with that, and especially in this channel, there's a lot of combination with technology and with experience at the same time. And, that combination of technology, but the biggest change, I will say, like, its experiences become, you have more tools, more ways to express things, and you were capable now to express emotions. And that's what kind of like this combination about spatial emotion and a spatial immersion, spatial immersion and spatial emotion, became together and started to drive. And what I found really interesting about your book is that it's one of those first kind of like manuals that are out there that kind of give you a glimpse into this kind of like thing that is relatively new for us, probably for Disney many years ago. But it's kind of like a new medium. Like, we have already radio and TV many hundreds of years ago developing itself, right? But now we're in the stage that we're developing. And in your book, you mentioned that you firmly believe that a well story can change the world. And how do immersive experiences provide an opportunity to bring about transformation in visitors to such experiences?
Oh my goodness, such a big question. When I went into this industry, I learned very early on that a really good story changes you. You think about some of your favorite stories of all time, whether it's a book or a TV show or a movie or a play that you watched, whatever it is, there's something about it that speaks to you, right? And those type of stories are the ones that maybe make you feel lonelier, more connected to the world, inspires you to take action and to make a change in your life. Whatever that story does, it creates a change in you. So as storytellers and as designers of experiences and places, of built places, it's the same thing. When your guest or participant walks into your design, into your experience, you meet them where they are. They come in as one person. And if that experience is successful, and if you've told your story in a very moving and emotional and compelling way, then they'll walk away from that experience changed. However you want to change them, whether you want them to believe that, personally for me, I want everyone to walk into my experiences and experiences and walk away believing that they're stepping into a better world, into a more positive, optimistic world. That's just me. But if you're creating a horror experience, right? If you're creating an experience about love or whatever it is, a revenge story, all of these things, right? Like, it doesn't matter what theme it is, but a well-told story will change your mind about something. And I think that that's what I mean, or a lot of people who are in immersive experiences believe in, is that when you walk into that space, that story changes you, has the ability to change you. And I think as designers, if we keep that in mind, that we have that great power and responsibility to be able to change people's minds, just like all of the famous storytellers of the past, right? People who have lived through the test of time, no matter what culture, what generation, they still, consume those stories and love it and retell it and all of these things. How do you, as a storyteller and a designer, really think about creating a world and a story that your participants will truly be moved and changed by it? And it comes in many different ways depending on what your message is, but you have to be intentional in that message. Because if you're not intentional about that message, then everyone perhaps will walk away being like, what just happened there? I don't understand. Or they're confused about what they just did. Or they're like, so what? I just went through this thing, but it's forgettable. So how do you create a place that makes them feel like they experience something worthy of their time and their attention and energy? Because make no mistake about it, we are in the business of grabbing people's attention, and people are more distracted than ever before. They have many choices when it comes to how they want to spend their time. So for them to say, hey, so and so group of family or friends, let's all gather together, pay money to go to your experience or whatever it is, or go to your place and spend time together so that we can play with each other, engage with each other, learn something about something that we don't know about, whatever it is. That's a very, very, very big honor for you as a designer to be able to have that opportunity to have their attention and hopefully have their suspension of disbelief of them walking into that world and believing that they're in your place, in your world.
And there is this thing that you wrote as well in the book that completely, like I was very resonated with this. And it's about making stories personal to make them universal. And for me, when I look back into the experiences that I previously been working in, every time that I look to them, and every time that I kind of like understand what was the story that I was trying to create or narrate, the personal stories always win. But I want you to explain how this is possible. Like, if you make it personal, you will make it universal.
Yeah. I think this is something that's extremely important for a lot of storytellers to realize early on. Because I remember when I was starting out with screenwriting and I was writing just feature scripts, and the stories that I was writing about had nothing to do with me or my life. They were really based on what I watched, what I saw, you know? And that to me, it's like, well, why rewrite another story that already exists, right? And that already exists in a very good, successful way, But it's okay to start off doing that, because as a beginner, as a novice, you want to learn. And when you're a novice, you learn to copy, right? You want to write the next Godfather. You want to write whatever favorite movie you love, like Y Tu Mamá También, like all the great films, right? So it's in learning and being do we start to learn as a novice, as a storyteller. When you get to a point in storytelling, when you start to draw your own personal experiences, because you've lived a very, hopefully a colorful, fruitful life, you can draw upon your own experiences as a human being to be able to tell those personal stories, those personal things that have happened to you that you can apply in your work. And in being able to apply those personal things, people will resonate with it, because those emotions, those feelings, those things that you've gone through, Maybe it's happy, maybe it's tragic or traumatic. All of those things are all part of the human experience. So there isn't any other human being in the world not resonate. There is at least one person in this big world that will resonate with you, right? And if you're able to touch, another human being in that very profound, deep way, where you're telling something that's very specific and authentic and personal to you, it's that much more compelling because it's happened to someone else, right? And because of that, you feel that very deep connection with that other person. I think of like, reading books and watching movies where it's not necessarily my experience, but there's something very human about it, right? Everyone has felt love or this feeling of envy or jealousy or wanting to revenge or avenge. All of these emotions are things that we can draw upon from our own personal experiences. And not to say that like every single project you work on should be about you and your story, but how can you draw upon your personal experiences to make it feel that much more believable and authentic because it comes from a real place. So that's the point of, how do you, by telling a more personal and specific story, you do make it universal because you're talking to a very universal human truth.
And also, there is some other element which is related to the theme in a story, right? So one of the examples that I always, love about explaining this kind of like a concept of the theme is something that is universal, right? For example, like the most common example is Avatar, right? Mm-hmm. Avatar, the theme is the intrinsic value of nature, right? And then the story is about, all this alien world and everything, right? And if you take that same concept to more stories, for example, no, and if you're talking about this one over here, like this is the story about how society influencing people's heads and mind, but then you have all these other kind of like intrinsic path about talking about a story. And this is what I like about the power of the stories is like when you make them personal, when you share them from your personal inner point of view, you connect them really well. And this is what I love about what you mean in that. And I wanted to also ask you about how does the story champion and assist the different areas of a multidisciplinary team into translate them then into story designs? How can provide them with freedom and avoid restrictions as well?
Yeah, it's interesting because I feel like there's not quite of obvious role, right, about what the story champion is. I think the closest industry that completely understands the importance of story or narrative are video games. They have a role called a narrative director or a narrative lead because you have, creative directors and art directors, but the narrative directors are mostly concerned with the visitor, the player experience, right? And so when you're dealing with guests and participants and visitors and players, you are looking at it from their point of view. So during my time at Imagineering, as well as working with companies working on museums and exhibits and all of this, that is my key role, is to look at it from the guest perspective. When they walk into this experience and go through the flow, the journey of the experience, what are they looking at? What are they observing? What are they experiencing? What are the actions and activities they're involved in doing and why? Because if that reason isn't evident enough, isn't strong enough, then there's going to be confusion about why they're doing something or why they're seeing something, right? There's a dissonance there. So how do you make something so that in all of the details all connects together, all aligns with the same creative intent of the world, of the place that you're building, so that every single guest and visitor can understand what they're doing? So as a story champion, when you're in meetings and when you're in work sessions, you are that defender of story, but also a defender of the participant slash visitor slash user, right? They're the ones who are going to be the ones at the end of the day to decide whether or not they love or hate your place or experience. So, as the story champion, not only concerned with whether or not this is a story that makes sense to the public, but is it engaging and meaningful enough for the public, for the guests to believe that this is worth doing, even, right? So there's many different layers for what a story champion does. But at the end of the day, it's not just about writing the scripts and writing the descriptions on the walls and writing the dialogue for the media or the audio. All of those things are part of what a writer does. But as a story champion, how do you translate story and manifest it into all the other disciplines that needs to tell their story too? So from the lighting designer to the architects to the interior designers to the audio, the media people, right? Every single team member on your team is trying to tell the same story as everyone else. So how do you align? And that's what the story champion does. Champion will be the one to, or one of the ones to be able to go around to all the various disciplines and say, hey, so, you know, this is a story that we're thinking of creating. What do you think? You know, have a collaboration, have that conversation and dialogue, evolve upon it, because as creatives, we have to be very comfortable with iterating and making sure that we're creating the best product, because you're not going to get it right the first time around, right? You have to go through many, many, many different rounds, get input, get feedback, you know, and really iterate based on of the notes and feedback to create something that is more compelling. So as that story champion, you know, you want to make sure that the story that you are creating as a team, you're making sure that everyone is aligned, everyone has been able to give their contributions and insights and feedback and input to it. You're the one that helps to make sure that everyone, all the information and the messaging of the story and everything is communicated throughout the team to make sure that we're all building the same, we're all pieces of the puzzle that are building the same picture of puzzle, right? And how do you really be one of the cheerleaders, really, the champions, to really make sure that everyone never forgets what that light is, right? The light of the story, the one that's guiding us to that place. So that's really, in a nutshell, what a
And,
story
and,
champion does.
and I'm gonna bring that into our industry because it just happened to me, you know, like 2 days ago. I was working in the design of an experience, and two things happened to me. Like someone, you know, there's this kind of like a stair that is in the middle of the experience, and someone just designed something there, and I was just asking them like, but what does that mean? Like, oh, it looks, you know, tell me, you know, if you're able to explain me what is for you based on the story
Yeah.
that we construct, it's a go. You know, I'm not gonna fight about that light, right? And I had the same experience. Like someone said, "Oh, maybe we should put a laser here." Why? I mean, now we have
Yeah.
the power to use lasers, to use sensors, to use interactivity, to use whatever we want, whatever the hell we want. But we want them with to use to respect something, because the biggest shift that has happened now with immersive experiences is that everyone becomes a director of their own movie. So you know, in cinema, you know, they're directors and they're just directing where do you want them to go. But right now the biggest shift is that we ourselves, we're in the story and we're becoming individual directors. We're directing our own movie. This is what is important, to put attention in all the details. And somebody asked me the other day, like, what has been like the best immersive experience that you have been in your life? And I said, like, by far, Star Wars Rise of the Resistance. By far. It's like I felt for the first time inside of a movie.
Yeah.
And thank you for that experience.
Well, it was a very, very big and talented team that put that together. And that was exactly the wish fulfillment that the whole team wanted to believe is we wanted to make you feel like you were in Star Wars, right? And more specifically, that you were in the middle of an epic battle between the light and the dark side. That you can have all of those feelings that Han and Leia and all of the heroes that came before you also went through. So that was a very, very one of the number one things on the bucket list. It's like, be in the middle of an epic battle in Star Wars, right? And you wanted to feel, the blasters and the lasers and stormtroopers and all of that stuff, right? We wanted you to want to escape from the dark side and the stormtroopers going through the corridors, all of those things. And it was a very ambitious project, and it's still, until today, when I go through that attraction, it brings tears to my eyes. It's just so action-packed and so emotional. So it was definitely a very, very great achievement by the team, definitely.
Congratulations. So I'm just gonna take a couple of minutes to do a short break and to talk to the community that are watching about the HQ. So for those who doesn't know, the Interactive and Immersive HQ Pro is the only school for immersive designers, creative technologies, and touch designers, artists, and developers online. And there is like 60 full touch designer courses about creative technology, plus 170 hours of content. We have a private Facebook group with coaches and touch designer experts, including Elburs and Matthew Ragan. We also have some internal sessions about working with technology, creativity. We have like over 120 built-in touch designer tools, projects, templates, and a certification program. And right now we have a 7-day free trial. All right, so back to the conversation. I love this one. I love this question because it talks about process and structure. It's always a good thing to have a process, right, for design stuff. But what is the recommend balance between creating with the structure method and having total freedom for the design?
I don't think it's either or. I feel like as a creative in any type of workflow or any type of project life cycle, you have to have some flexibility. And there has to be, there's always going to be people on the team who are more process oriented. And there are people in the team who are more creatives and would rather spend all their time in the world thinking up of new ideas all the time and changing it, right? And I think deadlines are always everyone's friends, even though it's a necessary evil, right? But it really keeps you focused on the end goal, because at the end of the day, you're gonna have to produce and deliver something. So I think that when it really depends on the phase of the project. Initially, when you're going through the blue sky process and you're conceiving of all these different ideas, that's the time. Depending on your company, depending on your independent process as an artist and as a creative, you give yourself enough time to make sure that you can think of every possible thing that could make your experience awesome and compelling, right? So that's really the time that I believe, is going to be the bulk of the creative work that you do as a team. That's when you ask all the big questions. That's when you all agree and align with that intent and hash it out, right? Because everyone's going to have different ideas. Everyone's going to have a different interpretation of what that experience is about. And it's a time for listening. And it's a time for receiving, just hearing all kinds of ideas. There are no bad ideas quite yet, right? But after that, after you've given enough time to make sure that you've thought of every single creative idea with all the stakeholders involved, right? The client, you, all of that stuff, then you have to move on. You just have to move on. Pencils down, you have to move on. And so in that moving on process, whatever you call it, concept phase or whatever it is for your particular project, is you have to start really envisioning what it is, what it looks like, all the various things, all the details to make it come alive based on what you've agreed upon initially in that, the blue sky, and answering all of those big questions. Because if you've done your job right initially, then all of you can be aligned in those values and in that vision, so that when you do move forward, and that you need to have that flexibility, and you have the example of someone wants to build a staircase all of a sudden, right? But if you've already set those values initially, you're like, okay, we have these 3 values. You use the example of Avatar, and one of those values was actually for Animal Kingdom, intrinsic value of nature. That's what Joe Rody and his team decided the values of the animal kingdom would be. And that one of them was intrinsic value of nature. So if you're building a staircase for your particular project, does that staircase fall under one of those values that all of you have agreed upon in the beginning? And if it doesn't, unless it's functional, unless you actually need a guest to walk up the stairs to go to the second level or whatever it is, right? Unless it's functional, does it fulfill something else that aligns with the values that you've already set as a team? And if it does not, then it can fall away. Then you don't need it, right? Just because it looks like a cool staircase, it doesn't need to be there, right? So I think that, do move on, and then you start building production, installation, all of that, all of those phases. Nothing's going to ever fall into place perfectly, right? There's always going to be challenges, there's going to be obstacles, and you'll always have to be flexible, and you always have to be able to, be resourceful and be collaborative and work with multiple disciplines to figure out and problem solve together. But ultimately, you have to build that camaraderie of collaboration and cooperation, really, because we're all adults trying to build something awesome. And not everyone's going to agree, because everyone has different opinions about things. But ultimately, everyone has the same goal of building something awesome. And no one argue with that. No one wants to build a crappy product, or we hope so, at least. So in order for you to be able to align with whatever decision that you make, you always have to go back to the very beginning of what you all had decided as a team. And together, you're going to hold hands, and you're going to move forward till the very end, as hard as it is. But that's something that we all as creatives have to practice and keep doing with every single project. And no 2 projects are ever the same, as you know.
I know. I'm going to jump into some questions from the audience. Like, please, if you guys have some questions to ask to Margaret. There's this question that I like a lot. Is about what advice would you give to someone who wants to be a show writer in experiences? It seems such a competitive field right now.
Yeah, it is. I have to say it is, and it is, and it was. It's always been competitive, and I think that it doesn't. Not my path is very different from every single path of a writer that I've met. My background was going into museum design, right? Because that was something that always interested me. That was actually, after seeing Haunted Mansion, one of my first loves was when I went to the Norton Simon Museum in Pasadena. And I was like, there's someone who thinks about this and curates these exhibits to be this way, and so I always, my advice is to always follow your curiosity wherever it leads you, because I went to film school thinking that I would be a film or TV screenwriter, but I realized that that was not what I really wanted to do. Then I found museum design, right? And from museum design as a writer, I got into Imagineering as a theme park designer. And so very different, museums and theme parks, similar in terms of the guest experience and storytelling, all of that, the power of narrative, right? So I think that I know that, from where you are, you want to immediately jump into being a writer of a location-based entertainment company or location-based experiences. But there are many other different avenues that you can take to be a writer or to be a designer or to be something else, so that you can actually build your creative muscles no matter what industry, and be open to like exploring different industries, right? I don't think there's ever an easy solution to, you seeing a job listing or not seeing a job listing, and trying to figure out like, how do I get that particular thing? But at this point in time, it's really good to just gain experience, as much experience as you can in any type of creative endeavor, because no matter what kind of job I've done in the past, I've always learned something from it. Everything from telling stories as an entertainment journalist, to being a researcher for a science education show for PBS, to being a producer for a little bit, right? I didn't always write for a living. So I think that you just have to be open, and you also should start thinking about building your own personal portfolio. And even if someone's not paying you to do it, work on projects that you can show as a sample of your work, right? Because in my interviews with various companies, I showed my writing samples, even though it wasn't, when I was just starting out, it wasn't a paid sample. It wasn't something that someone paid me to do to write, but it was something that I was interested in writing. And so, I think I mentioned it in my book, but for my thesis for USC, I wrote a script loosely inspired by the only female emperor of China, because I was curious about it. And I was like, I think I want to try writing a feature script of that, right? And I use that as one of my writing samples. So build your personal portfolio, make sure you have really excellent writing samples, because when the time comes and someone says, you want to be a writer for LBE, great, send me some samples. You want to show that you're a diverse writer, that you're not just a screenwriter, that you can write for audio, you can write for marketing materials, you can write for graphics, you can write for audio, you can write for product packaging, all of these things, because you will use all of that. You will use all of that as a writer in immersive and location-based experiences.
Thank you so much. So there is a question here about how is the process of integrating interactive elements and technology into an immersive experience?
Well, it really depends on what interactive elements and technology you're talking about. But ultimately, the rule of thumb is that that technology should feel invisible. It should feel like it's a natural part of the world and the story and the experience, and it should help to enhance my experience rather than distract me from it. I've been in experiences where I'm like, oh my gosh, what is all this equipment, and what do I have to wear, and what do I have to do, what do I have to hold, like all of these things, that it takes me out of the experience rather than making me go deeper into the experience, right? So all of that technology, I love being able to use technology and tools and all kinds of, really cool techniques, right? But how does all of the hardware of it fall away so that you can really be immersed in the story and the experience itself? How does it help to create that suspension of disbelief for your participant, to make them believe that they're really there? So that's the real magic, I believe, of the technology, right? Does that little whatever robot or that little thing that you've created make it feel like it's of a believable creature or animal? Is the really cool technology that you're projecting, somewhere, add to the story rather than be a distraction or something that is completely not connected to the story, right? So you have to really think about how to embed that technology and that the tools that you use into something that serves the point, the why of the story.
Thank you so much, Margaret. I'm going to take another question here about how much time do you spend user testing, and how do you prioritize necessary changes during that time?
I think user testing is extremely important. I think that a lot of the times even when it's called play testing in the industry, and actually in video game industry, I think that's where it comes from, is play testing. But ultimately, before you make any more costly mistakes, you can test it right to make sure that the intent of your experience and your project is felt by the visitor and understood, felt and understood by the visitor. So if you, even if, no, I joked at one other summit or presentation that even a presentation is a play test. It doesn't have to be expensive. But if you can go through your present or deck and pitch someone the idea of your place and they're excited by it, that's already user testing. You're already getting feedback and input and insights and impressions of your project, right? But I think that there is nothing better than being able to walk someone through an experience. As a builder of physical places, you want to make sure that you can involve all of the senses for people to go through your mock-up experience, right? We did this all the time at Walt Disney Imagineering. When for every single little thing and experience that we were going to build, we made sure we had, places, and we would invite, trusted members from other projects, other Imagineers, or we would invite family and friends. And eventually we can get enough input and feedback from all of those people to create a better product. So it's extremely important. Definitely make time for it. It doesn't matter, exactly when in the process of the project lifecycle that you do it, but I would say to do it early and often enough to get input. But ultimately, you still have fun and create your thing. So make sure that it's something that is going to be valuable for you, a team.
I'm going to share with you one more question. Wait, give me one more. So how do you go about making new stories to fit into pre-existing story and space, so that they are refreshing but call back to the original narrative?
Yeah, I mean, that's Star Wars Galaxy's Edge was the perfect example of that, right?
Right.
There was many films that came before, and graphic novels and books and animated series and everything. And one of the working with the Lucasfilm teams was a dream come true. Truly, they were the best partners. And I remember especially one of the members of the story team, Pablo Hidalgo, had said to us very early on. He said, we haven't told all of the stories of Star Wars, so we're interested to hear what your recommendations are. What kind of stories would you tell in the Star Wars universe? And that was really great because we were all fans, right? And so for us to be able to tap into our own fandom and really think about, okay, if we had to understand what made Star Wars, right? We had to understand, like, what's the DNA of Star Wars? What makes it so compelling? What makes people come back to the stories again and again and again? And there are many things that were true of it, right? There was, whatever it is that each individual person is drawn to about the Star Wars universe, were definitely commonalities. And so knowing what it was popular and what we wanted to uphold as the Star Wars, but be able to tell new stories that came from it, it had to be rooted from that DNA. It can't just be all of a sudden something random, right? Because as a Star Wars fan, we wouldn't want that either. All of a sudden something random comes along, right? So it was extremely valuable for us to work very closely with people who had deep knowledge of Star Wars, but who are also very open and had a very a nature of exploration, of wanting to discover new stories. But working closely together with subject matter experts is really one of the best ways to do it. No matter if you're working on Star Wars, a museum of science, a museum of some history. Always bring in people who have great knowledge and do your research and make sure you're very well informed and that you are a student of that subject and ultimately a scholar of that subject. Because I always joke that in my 5 years, I got a PhD in Star Wars. And so from that knowledge, then you can come with an informed mindset of being able to come with new ideas and explore new ideas that is deeply rooted in the DNA of whatever you're working on.
Thank you so much, Margaret, for your time and for your talk about the story. It's been an amazing talk. Can you just share with us about your next book? Like, what is it about? Like, when it's going to be released, please? I'm dying to know more about it.
Yeah, so my book is called Reimagined Worlds: Narrative Placemaking for People, Play, and Purpose. And the whole idea for this book is, the first book is a writer's guide. My second book is a designer's manifesto. So what it prompts designers to do is to be very thoughtful and intentional about building places that are human driven and narrative focused. So thinking about the why and thinking about the story of your place. And I talk about ordinary places like, everything from retail to hotels to museums. So not only just theme parks and immersive experiences, but ordinary places, and how you can think about using the tools and the techniques, storytelling, into building places that matter, that are meaningful to the community again. So I go all over the world in my travels to draw a lot of these examples, to really show examples of what are some places that have been very meaningful to me, and what have what kinds of tricks and tips they create in those places in order to build places that make me want to go back to it again and again and again. So it's I'm very excited about it, and it's something where I want to really have designers think about creating very meaningful and meaningful places, really, not just places that are empty shells. I always use the analogy of, a building with a story is like, a shell is just a shell until you say to someone, hear the ocean, when you put a shell on your ear. But a build out that story is just a shell. So how do you put an ocean into a building? How do you tell that story in a building that makes it so compelling, that makes people say, yes, I want to go to the ocean too?
My God, so we're eager for that book. Thank you so much for your time, guys. If we're gonna share Instagram account for Margaret. If you don't follow her, please do. If you're in the interactive or immersive industry, or museums, so that book from Margaret is like a must for to have it in your reading program. It's been amazing. I would love to keep going into all these questions that arrived, but unfortunately, we would have more time. I know you're busy. Thank you so much for being here today with us.
Oh, thank you so much, Josue, and thank you to the whole community for watching. And I wish you all the best of luck in all of your studies. Keep telling your stories, keep sharing authentic stories, and I cannot wait to come to your places and experiences. So please invite me. Thank you, everyone.
Bye, everyone.